Here it's got the 5 point. Here it just says 5.9. Okay. 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 Good. Okay, everybody, we are going to get started with the community development meeting for the first meeting of the new term on Monday, January 8th, 2024. Before I start the... Everybody, we are going to get started with the community development meeting for the first meeting of the new term on Monday, January 8th, 2024. Before I start the... Development meeting, the first meeting of the new term on Monday, January 2024. Before I start the what on earth can we do about that? We have to find money for a new system. Geez. Laugh because you can't take it. Okay, my friends, we are going to try this one more time. Keep going. Okay. Anyway, I was welcoming everybody to the first community development meeting of the new term, January 8th, 2024. Just for reference, this committee will remain the same as last term, so I'd like to introduce everybody. Even though we have a full panel, we have 5 members that are on the committee, and the first one would be Mr. Oswald. We have Mr. Schneider, Mr. Lippian, and the vice co-chair would be Mrs. Mitchell and myself. Tonight we have 2 items on the agenda. First one is the approval of the community development meetings from December 11th, 2023. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Oswald, seconded by Mrs. Mitchell.
Question.
Question on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Second item is the matter of whether the city should accept an annexation of 5.9668 acres of land on Dewhurst Road from Carlisle Township. Assistant Law Director Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's sort of a misnomer. It's really not whether you should accept, it's formalizing your acceptance. So this is probably the last part that the city has to deal with of an annexation procedure that was started last spring. And it was started when Mr. Yost, through his company, Thailand Limited, wanted to annex a few acres in Carlisle Township off Dewhurst Road, approached the city and the township. City and the township, Carlisle Township, entered into an annexation agreement at that point with council's blessing. We passed an ordinance supporting that annexation agreement, and that annexation agreement requires council to accept the annexation, and acceptance is a statutory term. 709.04 of the revised code requires us within a certain time period after the resolution by the county commissioners approving the annexation requires the municipal corporation to accept or reject that annexation. So this annexation agreement, we agreed, as a city, agreed to accept rather than reject the annexation within the appropriate time frame. That time frame has come, and I am here asking you to finalize the rest of that by accepting the annexation pursuant to the statute. I'll be available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Oswald.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm getting it backwards, who's providing the water, who's providing the sewer, and then will the bill be split? Because I don't think we're doing both.
Well, Mr. Oswald, this is on Dewhurst Road, which is in the rural water facility planning area for water provision. This is in the City of Elyria facility planning area for sanitary sewer. I'm not sure, and I don't see any engineers here. I'm not sure if we have sanitary sewer readily available out there, but at some point, if it isn't now, it will have to be there for us to accept this annexation. But that's an engineering issue, I believe. That's in our facility planning area. We will have to provide it. We cannot and will not provide the water because that's outside of our FPA.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Comments? Mrs. Sawarka.
You calling me? I'm sorry.
I thought I saw you raise your hand.
I'm not on the committee, but I do have a question. I asked Mr. Bruning the other day if he knew how many homes were going to be built on this property, but we still don't know the answer to that.
I do not know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will say that any homes that would be built would have to comply with our zoning code, and that if there were any variances from that, they would have to go through planning commission or obtain lot splits, subdivision plats, et cetera.
Yeah, of course, through you, Mr. Chairman. I ask because we already have a traffic nightmare over there. So however many homes are added to Dewhurst, we'll just add to the traffic trying to come out on Chestnut at Dewhurst. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of a request for acceptance of the annexation of approximately 5.9 acres of property on Dewhurst Road from Carlisle Township to the City of Elyria. This is an ordinance authorizing to accept the said annexation. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Mitchell, seconded by Mr. Oswald.
Question.
Question on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Seeing no further business for community development, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Oswald, seconded by Mr. Lippian.
Question.
Question on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.
Good evening. Welcome, Mayor Brubaker and all the members of his new administration to the first finance meeting of the year and of your administration. Pretty awesome. So welcome. I will call finance to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the finance minutes from November 27th and December 11th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions?
Call for the question.
All in favor, use a voting sign, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, the matter of inactive and delinquent EPU accounts to be certified to the Lorain County Auditor's Office. This is a standing referral referred by Public Works Supervisor Connor. If she could come up.
Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair, there was a list provided of these are all multi-unit accounts. The water is still on in those accounts. There are tenants living there. These are all been approved by the resolution board last Friday to be referred to finance to move on to be liened on the property.
For our new member of council and returning member of council, this is a fairly standard item that we do. Water bills that aren't paid get referred to us, then we place a lien on them, just so you're aware. Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Davis?
Through you, Chair, I have a problem with this High Point in the Park. Now, is this a new bill that's not been added to the previous bill?
Correct.
So they're up to what, $7,500,000 that they owe us?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have recouped $83,000, I believe, from that probably about 6 months ago when we liened that large amount. They paid their taxes, and we got the funds from them. This is the second time after that we've liened this. This is 3 bills on the account right now.
3 bills? Through you, Chair, 3 bills. So how often are we billing? If this is 3 months and we letting it go this long?
Our rules, through you, Mr. Chair, our rules state after 60 days of delinquency, we can lien the property. So that's how we have 3 bills.
Please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this probably will not be a surprise or a shock to anyone in this room, certainly not to anyone up here sitting at the dais. This property is quite frankly a problem, not least of which is the outstanding utility bills. It is something that my office, also administration, it's going to be a multi-departmental approach, not the least of which is the water bill. Unfortunately, as are many other addresses on this list, we are dealing with a situation where tenants are residing there in the best way to describe them is that they are innocent bystanders. Really the only other option, and I certainly don't think it's an option in this case, is to shut the water off when these individuals in all likelihood have paid their rent with the understanding that the utilities are a part of that. And therefore, this is the option available to the city. And while it's not immediate, we have been seeing results. But High Point in the Park has definitely been on the city's radar.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. Connor? Ms. Soroka?
What's our percentage of uncollectible at this point in time? Is it lower, higher? Is it?
Our delinquency rate is about 5% over 60 days.
Okay.
And what we've turned over to the county for liens, we've recovered, I think, about 73% of that. You know, there's that gap because of every 6 months when people pay their taxes. But it's working quite well.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously, I'm very familiar with this process. There's a lot of repeat customers on this list. It's too bad that we can't do something different. Like it's a constant circle of just doing the same thing. It's kind of like grass cutting. You know, cut it, you know. I wish there was a different way that we could sort of get their attention so that we don't have to go through this process, because there's a lot of time and effort on our part, your staff's part, the county's part to do this. But there doesn't, you know, there's really no penalty other than they pay extra, right? When they pay on their when they pay their taxes?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we get our 100% back when they pay. It's like a 3 or 4% charge that the county puts on.
The county puts on, yes, right, that's what I thought. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other? Please, Mr. Snyder.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is obviously becoming the way we collect from High Point in the park. It seems like every few months you're up here collecting that. Is there any way we can implement, this may be a law director question, can we implement a penalty to these entities with the multifamily for not paying on time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that it has been thrown out there for debate for years now of whether there should be a late penalty, regardless of whether it's multi-unit or single family, what have you. That is obviously something that council could and perhaps should consider, because a person pays the same amount, whether you pay your bill early or on time, or 2 months late. There is no late charge. That is something that could be considered, and other communities do. Yes.
I have a question on that note. Would that have to originate through utilities or through finance, or could it go through either?
As far as the committee?
Yes.
I would imagine that it would be assigned to both. One, because it involves our utilities department and our utilities fee schedule, but also finance, because again, it would affect the fees. So.
Okay.
But as far as who makes the referral, I mean, I think that would be the least of our concerns that we could make happen.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mrs. Sawerka?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would think, though, that our billing system could do an aging and add that right to the billing. We probably could add an aging amount so that there would be a automatic delinquency. So say it's 60 days in arrears, 2% gets added, or if it gets 90 days or whatever it would be. Our billing system probably could do that automatically.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Chair. It does. And we have a provision in our rules where at any time we could add a percentage when we're reviewing our rules to have something put in.
So this has already been passed at some point in council, this no?
Well, no, it's right now it's 0, but the wording is there.
The wording is there? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mrs. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. When you have a place like High Point in the Park who's just not paying on time, charging them a late fee, I think, is appropriate. But when you, and the repeat offenders, of course, but when you have everyday people who are doing the best they can and maybe get behind on their bills, and the water bills, as we all know, because we hear the complaints are high enough as it is, I think we have to, for people who are just not habitually late, but just maybe late every once in a blue moon, before we charge them a late fee, I think we have to show some compassion. That's just my opinion. Thank you. And I don't know how you do that. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And again, I think that should that referral be made to the respective committees, I think those are all things that could be parsed out. Obviously, there may be a difference between being a day or two late and someone being 60 days late, and again, being habitually late. I think those are all things that could be hashed out.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Call for the question.
If not, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of inactive, delinquent public utility accounts, a resolution authorizing said delinquent accounts to be certified to the Lorain County Auditor's Office as per the attached list. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded. Call for the question.
Question.
All in favor, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the matter of accepting the first optional year of the existing contract for sludge disposal with the Lorain County Landfill LLC. This is referred by Superintendent Corzine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is one of our annual housekeeping items that we usually do. Last year, we went out for bids for sludge cake disposal from the wastewater plant, and we awarded the contract to Lorain County Landfill. We have the option of picking up the first optional year of that contract. The cost currently is $34.88 per wet ton, and it will go to $36.29 per wet ton, which is just a minimal increase.
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Corzine? I'd ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You better read it.
Oh, I apologize. I have to read the committee report. We have considered the matter of entering into the first optional year of the existing sludge disposal contract for the wastewater pollution control plant, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into the continuation of the said contract. The cost for this first year, optional year, will be $36.29 per wet ton. Now can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Corzine. Yes. Item number 4 tonight, the matter of advertising for bids and to enter into a contract for chemicals for the wastewater, the WWPC plant for 2024 and 2025. Superintendent Corzine.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Again, this is the second of our 2 annual housekeeping items that we do every year. We need to go out annually to bid out our chemical purchases for the wastewater pollution control plant, and we ask that we include the emergency clause to allow the law director's office to put together the contracts and everything. This current contract expires on April 15th of 2024.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Corzine? And again, I'll emphasize he has requested this be an emergency. Any questions? I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of the purchase of operating chemicals for the wastewater pollution control plant for years 2024 and 2025. Legislation to be drawn authorizing an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of said chemicals. Current contract expires April 15th, 2024. This will be set as an emergency. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Motion's been moved and properly seconded.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the matter of advertising for bids and to enter into a contract for chemicals. Excuse me one second. Oh, I'm sorry. The matter of advertising for bids and to enter into a contract for chemicals for the water pumping plant for 2024 and 2025. Mr. Jacob.
For you, Mr. Chair, this is a normal yearly housekeeping issue. We go out every year for chemicals, the same as Mr. Corzan. And we also would like this as an emergency since we do all our chemicals, advertise everything together.
Are there any questions for Mr. Jacob? Mrs. Sawerka?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Mr. Jacob, I was just curious, do you still have just a single source for that one chemical that has to come from Belgium, was it? Wasn't there a chemical that we had to get from, is that still the case?
For you, Mr. Chair, that was sodium silica fluoride. And it depends. One year we got it part of the year from China that we rejected the bid. I think you were there and got rid of it and got the second low bidder this year. It's coming from Belgium.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting. Didn't know that. Any other questions? Let me read the committee report then. We have considered the matter of the purchase of operating chemicals for the water pumping plant for years 2024 and 2025. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of said chemicals. This is an emergency. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, please use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Didn't know if it was okay for me to do it. I didn't do it on the last one. She is. Next item on the agenda is number 6, the matter of applying for and accept, if awarded, a grant from the Office of Criminal Justice, OCJS, for the 2024 Crime Reduction Grant Program. This was referred by Chief Pelko. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is an ongoing grant. We've applied for it in the past, and we would like to apply and, if awarded, accept the grant from the Office of Criminal Justice for Violent Reduction in Crime Acts. The applications were past due on January 4th. We've already applied for it. We're asking for $90,000 in funds. It'll be used towards cameras throughout the city and overtime for manpower, and it's all 100% reimbursable.
Is there a match to this?
No, there's not a match.
Okay.
Nope.
And did you need this as an emergency?
If we could do an emergency, that would be great.
Awesome. Any questions for Chief Pelko? Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Chief, is this ARPA money coming from the state or no?
It is not ARPA funding. I think I might have misinterpreted that on my email to you, but it is not ARPA.
Not ARPA, okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Mrs. Sawerka?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, any other local communities applying along, is this a competitive thing, or is it a pretty automatic that we're gonna get this?
So it is competitive. We collaborate with the Northern Ohio Violent Crime Consortium, which is the 7 major police departments in Northeast Ohio, and we collaborate with them as part of this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of applying for a grant from the State of Ohio Violent Crime Reduction Grant Program, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to apply for and accept the said grant. Funds are reimbursable. No match will apply for $90,000. Emergency clause has been requested. Deadline to submit was January 4th. It has been submitted. Legislation to follow submittal. Can I get a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded.
Question?
Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, use the voting sign aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, number 7. I apologize, this is on me. I was late getting it in, but it was a standing referral. The matter of agreement with Macaulay and Company for grant writing and consulting services for 2024. This was tabled from 11/13 and 11/27. Using Macaulay and Company, we've generated several times our investment in this. It's been a very good program in the past. Mayor Brubaker, I don't know if you want to speak to this or not, if you want to say anything about it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for putting this on. I had actually spoke to former Mayor Whitfield just after the election and asked him to table this till I had a chance to look at it. My understanding is the cost was going to go up in 2024. That was not the matter. It will remain as the same as 2023. I've met twice with Mr. Macaulay in regards to this contract. This evening, I actually sent the proposed contract down to Mr. Bruning, so his staff can start looking at this. But I would ask the council approve this to continue our grant writing capabilities. I also spoke to Mr. Farrell in regards to his part in this, where they were doing the reporting, and I really don't think it's fair to ask the finance director's office to do that reporting when it's really coming out of our office. So I advised Mr. Farrell that we would take on the reporting part of that back to the granting agencies to alleviate that from him. And then I will also ask that this be passed as an emergency, as we do have some things on the docket for grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions on this for anyone? Mrs. Sawerka?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, either perhaps to you or the finance director, did we spend 120 in 23 and we're going to spend another 120 in 24, or is this a continuation? I was a little confused as if this was a continuation of the previous 120.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I think we were a little bit shy of the 120 spent. John, do you have anything?
Through the chair to Mrs. Worker, yes, they billed us $10,000 a month. So, we spent the whole 120 has been paid to them.
Okay.
For 2023.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I thought maybe it was each time they wrote a grant that they would send us a bill for that particular, but.
It's a flat fee monthly that comes in, and I believe it's quarterly. They will send us one of the things that we requested. They'll send all members of council an update of a list of all the things that they've applied for, what they've done. We didn't get that in year 1. We received it in year 2, and through Mayor Brubaker, I would ask that they continue that moving forward.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I actually had a conversation with them, and at least once a quarter at the direction of this committee, that they actually come and present a report, but also share with council in person versus just setting a written or unless at the discretion. And through you to Mrs. Swerka, I know one of the things that the law director's office, and I concur 100% with, is asked for is a detailed billing for this. It's not just they're going to send us a bill for $10,000 and we pay a check. They will give us a detailed report.
Thank you. Any more questions, discussion? I'll read the committee report then. We have considered the matter of a professional services agreement with Macaulay and Company LLC for professional grant writing and consulting services, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into said agreement. This is not to exceed $120,000, and this is an emergency. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, number 8, the matter of entering into an ambulance service agreement for the city. This was referred late in the year by former Safety Service Director Lundy. Both the new administration and council, I won't say it that way. I'll back up from that. I would ask our Assistant Law Director to come up and speak. I'll give just a short snippet on this to everyone. Over the last several years, the ambulance business has changed. How Medicaid, Medicare funds has changed the reimbursement policies and procedures for ambulance services. How ambulance companies themselves operate has changed as well. I'll let the law director get into it a little bit deeper than this, but we received notice that our current ambulance service needed financial backing from the cities that they operated in to continue to operate. And we have until January 30th to make a decision. We are out of contract with them right now. We have been out of contract, and they have given us until January 30th to come to a financial agreement with them on ambulance service. We've had a few detailed discussions regarding this, so at this point, I will turn this over to Mr. Brunig. You want to take it from here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, and thank you for laying out the groundwork there. Just to give council and new administration a little bit more detail, and obviously we've had some discussions with some of you one-on-one here, but to reiterate the chair's points, we are out of contract with Life Care. They have been providing ambulance service for us for many, many years, going back to the late 80s, if not sooner, under a different name, probably into the 70s. But the landscape has changed, and we are not the first. That is the good news. We are not the first in Lorain County that is going to have to pay for continued emergency transport services. Other communities, Vermillion, Amherst and their Sandstone Ambulance District have come to terms with Life Care on other agreements. It seems to be that as Life Care's agreements with various communities expire, They are requiring those communities to pay some sort of stipend in order to continue those services. While that may sound very discouraging at first, and it does, admittedly, we've been going without paying for this service for decades. As Mr. Tolet also said, the landscape has changed. Things are different. The medical billing industry is certainly different. The insurance industry is certainly different. The other communities that Life Care has negotiated with agreed to pay them a flat fee for services. That was something that we, the previous administration, previous finance chair, and I really pushed back on. We really wanted to see some accountability and some measurable data from Life Care in order to justify services. So what was proposed to us is a flat fee of $126 per patient transport, or non-transport. So the problem right now for Life Care is that they do not receive reimbursement from any insurance if there is no transport. They show up at a scene, they provide some life support services, some basic services, maybe no services at all, depending on the situation, depending on the call. Those services may range, but they have nothing on which to bill if they don't actually transport a patient. And that happens fairly frequently. So their demand to us and to the other communities is based on that, being reimbursed for those, we call them no transport runs. So our agreement that we have structured in principle, subject to council's approval, would be to pay Life Care the amount of $126 per no transport run. The other provisions under the previous contract would be pretty much intact in that they would still be responsible and accountable to us for the time in which it takes them to respond to medical calls. They are still going to be held to NFPA, which is a national organization that renders advice and standards on these things. They will be held to those standards, continuing as those standards may change and improve. They will continue to be held to those standards. So they will have to, again, arrive at the scene within the prescribed amount of time, at least 90% of the time, if not better. And we can hold them accountable to that. The other major issue on this is the time. They responded to, there was, going back historically a little bit, I should back up, there was, about a year ago, I think, an RFP that was sent out for a new contract for new ambulance service. There weren't any responses except for Life Care, which is why we're in this situation. They're the only ones who responded, but they had additional parameters they wanted to place on this, and here we are. 5-year deal is what they are asking for under this new structure. Again, as Mr. Tolet stated, we have until January 31st to respond. The implication is if we do not respond and do not come to terms with it within that period of time, that they may exercise their right, which they have, they are not in contract, to withdraw from servicing Elyria residents. That means not responding to any 911 calls within the city, not transporting any patients within the city, and as of right now, we have no backup plan. So we have, as you stated, until January 31st to agree to this deal or something substantially similar to it, or we run the risk of not having transport services within the city. Those are the basics. Of course, I'm here for questions.
Before these calls, so everyone knows, what they're asking for reimbursement are non-transport calls. Some examples of that, and there are many of these. I'm going to be careful what I say. Mr. Stewart said, be careful. If, I'm going to use this example. This is a great example. A chemo patient falls out of bed and can't get back in the bed. All they need is put back in that bed. That is a non-transport call. But at the same time, one of the things that Chief Pronesti alluded to in the tremendous high call volume at the beginning of 2023 was we have the whole country, people are calling 911 for many, many more things today. And when Life Care responds, and look, my son has a bloody nose, but it's not bloody anymore, you can go back. Right now, they can't bill. They're not allowed to bill for their labor or fuel or any of those things. And so that's what we as a city are going to pay for to keep the entire ambulance service operational. The other thing that I will request from the law director in this contract, and excuse me, the law director and assistant law director, I am going to request that this be passed as a 3-year contract. And if we need to go back to Life Care, we still have a very little bit of time, but we do have time. And I think it would give us greater options if we came back at 3 years. So I will open the floor up for questions now. I'm sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that. I will tell you that the discussions as far as the length of time, we have had those conversations with Life Care's legal counsel. They are quite firm on the 5 years. I can tell you that there are numerous provisions for terminating early on both sides. But Mr. Brunig, please correct me if I am incorrect, but I believe that they are quite firm on the 5 years. That's not to say that after we have this meeting that we cannot go back to them once again, but I want you all to be clear that for those of you who are voting here at committee tonight, that they are quite firm on the 5 years.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brunig, am I?
The law director is correct. I did speak with Life Care's counsel earlier today, and he reiterated that 3 years was probably not going to cut it with them, that 5 years was what they were looking for and what they would agree to. But again, I can only take back to them what counsel recommends.
Mr. Schneider?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Assistant Law Director Bruning. Do we have any data on how many non-transport calls we had in 2023, just to give us like a gauge of what we're looking at with the $126 per non-transport?
2023 was approximately 3,900.
3,900?
Right.
Thank you.
Mrs. Davis?
Mr. Chair, I really know what you're talking about with this non-transport, and I here also want to ask them, got there. One, upset me because I thought hopefully they get charged for it, and now I'm hearing these people out here calling some ambulance, and then when it comes, they decide they don't want it. Now, we got to put the bill. I'm sure there is times that worry, but when somebody that I see this, these people just, I need an ambulance, and then when it comes, they say no, now it falls back on the city, and I truly believe for that, like you said, 39 calls, but one that I witnessed was a false call. There's more than just that one that I witnessed. Also to hear residents that could be someone else.
It's not just our residents. This is a nationwide problem, but it is substantial. I have a quick question for the fire department. I'm glad they're here, and they are a departmental. Mr. Brunig, I would ask that you stay close, because there is a standard response time that is required for a municipal ambulance service that will go into this contract, and I believe it was NFDD, NFPA. In our system that we have right now, would the fire department have the capability through 911 to track that response time? No, I see Chief. No. Please.
So the biggest issue is that you can call me and ask me for any kind of record, and I can have it. Same thing with police, or how many gallons of chemicals we use in the water. With a private company, it is private company. So that has been the issue that we have faced my entire career with getting data. Now, that's not saying they won't give it to you if you ask, but it sure is a lot easier to field a phone call from the safety director or from a council person to say, there was an emergency on my street, why did it take you 10 minutes to show up? Well, I can pull out the phone out of my pocket, my computer, my iPad, and tell you immediately how long it took. I can't do that with a private company.
Do you know what the response time standard is? And I know that's an unfair question. 4 minutes. Okay.
The biggest thing here is trying to educate everybody. There are two types of calls in the medical field, emergency medical: BLS, basic life support, and advanced life support. Your fire department responds on advanced life support calls. Basic life support is would be someone falling out of bed. It's a basic life support call. A hemorrhage, a nosebleed, it's a basic life support call. The time standards are different based on that. So the biggest issue is you can hold me and I can hold my department to a standard of getting out the building, getting on scene. That's the whole reason why you have fire stations in America, is to uphold these standards. And with a private company, they can certainly go to those standards and we can hold them to them, but I don't necessarily think, I will tell you in my experience, it's been difficult to constantly keep that kind of record, that kind of continuous data, to get that data.
Then what and please, I don't speak for everyone on the committee, but I think an additional request, if they're going to bill us $126 per call, we need, whether it's Macaulay or whether it's an ambulance service, we need detail on that billing. Part of that detail would need to be response time. If that's a contractual obligation, I would request from our law department that be built into the billing portion of this agreement. Please.
That should not be a problem. I don't anticipate any issue with requiring certain data as far as, accounting for their services built into the contract. If you want to make that part of the monthly billings, I think we should be able to do that. I will certainly have discussions. Those are part of the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of the contract that are still being worked out, and I can absolutely require them. And let's be honest, I would absolutely require some kind of measurable data in this contract regardless. I will specifically include that because I want to maintain for the city the ability to hold them accountable for what they're agreeing to and give us a little bit of leverage here if we need to hold them in breach. God forbid we have to terminate the contract at some point. We have to have measurable grounds on which to do those things. Those will be part of that agreement when it is finalized. So that is still in process. I can assure you that the final version will include some elements of that.
Thank you. Mayor Brubaker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, what is the penalty if it is breached multiple times? I mean, there's a clear evidence that it's whatever those measurements are not being met. What is the penalty to that, if you will?
Yeah, please. That is yet to be worked out, but I can probably come up with some kind of financial sanctions on them with the contract. Obviously, nothing like that is going to come close to, making anyone whole if if those standards are breached in such a way that, causes any kind of pain and suffering or loss of life or anything like that. But if it were to happen repeatedly and egregiously enough, we would probably have grounds to terminate that contract early. Now, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that if we do that, we can't just do that without having a plan. Okay, so there's we're in this position now because we only have one option. Okay, so whether these things happen or not, I can float the idea of some kind of financial sanctions for penalties like that. But ultimately, the ultimate breach, the ultimate remedy for the city would be to terminate that contract. What is the alternative? So that's going to be a conversation, Mayor, that our office would have with you, with the chief, to make sure that, we don't have to exercise any of those options. I think if we are insistent upon getting this measurable data with life care in this bills, that we can stay on top of that and not let it get to that point. So we can catch these problems early. We'll get the chief the information and the data that he needs to help us analyze it, and we'll stay on top of it the best we can.
We are going to need guidance during this from the fire department. We're going to need that. And so they need to play some part in this. We don't know what that is right this second. The measuring of data. Dean, you have a question, please. Oh, I apologize. Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I think we need to keep in mind that Life Care has been a good partner.
Very good partner.
They've been a good partner, and this is not about beating up Life Care and saying that they're not doing their job. I don't believe that's true. Life Care has been doing their job. And this is about the residents of the city of Elyria. We cannot not have an ambulance service.
I agree.
Sit here and pontificate all night long, but the bottom line is we have to have an ambulance service to service our residents. Life Care has been a good partner, and I don't think it's fair that we sit here and beat them up.
I agree, but at the same public safety is our number one priority. No question, when you said that to me that day, that resonated over and over and over, and you're 100% correct. But now we're taking taxpayers' dollars and sending it to them. So again, the same as Macaulay and Company or whoever we do business with in the city, we need detail for those funds.
If I could, no one here, and I will tell you, no one here from the fire department or my office is bashing Life Care. That is probably a rumor because I'm just so dedicated to the citizens, but they provide a good service. What I need to get across to every single person in these seats is that you need to understand the world has changed in the emergency medical way of life, and our role has increased. So no one here is beating them up. I will tell you this, I will go on record to say that they are overworked and overwhelmed as Cleveland EMS, as FDNY EMS. Every EMS service in this country, including my firemen, are just overwhelmed with the amount of 911 EMS calls. And it really did, you know, everybody can venture why. I will probably tell you, in my experience, it probably started with COVID, but it's also a generational thing. When we were growing up, you went to the doctor, you didn't call. There's a whole generation that when they need any kind of help, they call 911. And lastly, I would like for you to know, and please share this with other council members, your constituents, 911 and your firemen are not magical beings that can assume what is wrong with you from a distance. When people call 911 and they have, let's just say, a cold, or they have the flu, and they're saying, well, I can't breathe. Well, my guys that are sitting in the firehouse or out doing inspections, or an ambulance crew on West Avenue, difficulty breathing is difficulty breathing. We don't understand what the problem is until we get there. So that leads to a lot of calls where we will respond with life care, and you know, then it's a no treat. One last thing, I need every single one of you to please reach out to me and find out exactly what we do as a service. And there's so much confusion and so much misunderstanding about the fire department and their role in EMS. Two things I want to get across. Number one, we only respond on 46% of all 911 EMS calls in the city. So that means that every time someone in this city of Elyria calls and they say, do you need police, fire, EMS? You are getting an Elyria fire apparatus only 46% of the time. That is because of the nature of the calls that we go on. We do not go on every single call. We only go on those advanced life support calls. The second thing I want to get across, your Elyria firemen are paramedics. They can deliver intravenous drugs, they can jumpstart your heart, they can send an EKG to the hospital. And it's not when we say life care's response times, it's you have geographic fire stations that serve your respective wards in your community. Well, years and years ago, 50 years ago, people said, well, fire departments, fire stations are geographically located so they can get to you in a timely manner. It only makes sense to increase their training. So I'm proud to say that I can deliver a paramedic with my patch on it within 4 to 5 minutes, and those gentlemen are awesome. If you get a life care medic before us, hey, great. The city has one hell of a service. But there are some misconceptions that I ask all of you to help clear that up, or if you have questions, to ask me, because it's not being done.
If you get a second to walk in Cedar Street, there's a chalkboard in there. And the call responses by month are on that board written on there, and you'll be shocked if you haven't looked at that. And it's kind of just to walk in, say hi to the employees, see what's going on. It's unbelievable. Yes, Mr. Oswald.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not on this committee, but thanks for letting me speak. Shortly after they made the transition with the company, I did tour the building. First off, amazed at what they can do, and with all these screens, it's incredible. We do have great services, you know, in the city of Elyria. I have to agree with Mrs. Mitchell, because you know what, this is a company, you don't run a company to fail. They want to succeed. They've had financial hardship, which I never understood about getting paid for these calls. Once you find out how much work they're doing and they're not getting paid, we got to figure out something to make it work, okay? And that's what we're doing right now. And they're a good company. And like you just said, we need to keep it together and keep it going. And not so much play hardball, but just play together and see what works to help everybody make a living in life. So
I agree, Mr. Oswald, and Mrs. Mitchell is 100% correct. And if I came across a little harsh. That was not my intent, and I apologize. But public safety is always priority one, and she's 100% correct. Mr. Stewart.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not on this committee, but I've been involved heavily in the discussions for some time over and through, and, you know, Ms. Mitchell hit it right the nail on the head about, you know, Life Care and, you know, long-standing company here, and we appreciate their services in that. So, you know, but this is, you know, we're coming to a crossroads where within our community and public safety, obviously that's been echoed here a lot within the last couple minutes about, you know, the services that we need and those and what we need to provide for our residents. You know, and this is, you know, the request for proposals went out at the end of last year. And, you know, initially that's what we were talking about is a 3-year commitment. I know that's been kind of going back and forth. We went back through, they're requesting a 5-year commitment. But my thing, after thinking hard about it over the weekend, is, you know, we don't know where we're going to be financially at in these 5 years with the ARPA funds that are, you know, and we don't know what funding mechanism this is going to be coming out of. So those are my concerns in regards to that. You know, financially, I know that doesn't mean that we're still going to need that service. I'm not discounting that, but I would think we can evaluate it more after, you know, the second or third, closer to when we get close to the 3rd year, if we're going to implement it back and continue on these services. But I think financially, that's going to be a big burden to us, and what these, you know, these costs are going to be looking like. If it's initially, you know, based on these numbers that they're telling us, that they did 4,000 calls, that's close to $500,000. That's a significant amount of money. So I think that's why I would be strongly stress the 3-year commitment and then see how things are going after each year so that we can actively look at the numbers and say, hey, this is where it's going, the direction from that standpoint of it. So that's why I just kind of wanted to weigh in on that. Again, I'm not on the committee, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mrs. Sawarka.
I have several questions, Mr. Chairman, but I would like to hear from Assistant Chief Marks, if that's okay.
Yes, I had opened the floor to the fire department, so we're within Robert's Rules of Order.
While he's making his way up through you, Mr. Chairman, while he's making his way to the podium, I do have a question for Mr. Bruning. I didn't hear you say a not to exceed on this agreement. Is there a not to exceed number?
For purposes of appropriating money, we're going to have to put a not to exceed number on this. Life Care is okay with it if we put on a $400,000 cap initially, but they have stressed that they want to get paid on their runs. If we look like we're going to exceed that towards the end of this year, we might have to come back and ask for an increase in that not to exceed. So yes, there will be, to answer your question, Mrs. Sawarka, there will be a not to exceed in the ordinance and in the contract initially. But that is to satisfy state law regarding, you know, contracts and appropriations, not so much to limit the amount. I mean, the calls of calls, whatever comes out, we have to pay.
Thank you.
Mr. Marks? I'm sorry, Mr. Snyder.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Assistant Law Director Bruning. Did you say that, are they billing us monthly for this? Did I catch that?
The plan is to be billing monthly, yes.
All right, thank you.
And I will ask for as much detail as we can possibly get on those bills so we can evaluate and analyze.
Thank you.
And commentary here, but just based on previous discussion, for what it's worth, anytime I've asked for data and, you know, assistance from them in coming to terms with these things, they've been nothing but cooperative. So I don't expect any pushback from them at all regarding some of these analytics that we're asking.
Thank you. Now it's your turn.
I was trying to be patient. And when I originally was coming up here, I'm sorry, Dean Marks, President of Local 474, Leary Firefighters. It was kind of to talk about exactly why, and we've had a couple council people speak now about it, that somehow there's this notion that the fire department doesn't like Life Care. That's completely the opposite. we're an all-hazard response department now. The days of just going on fires are long gone. We have paramedic pumpers. We do provide, and we have been supplementing life care for years. I've been on the department 28 years. I remember back when we had an assistant chief that said, you know what, we're not running EMS anymore. And there was backlash both by the administration, but also from our union saying, that's not what we're in this game for. We're here to support the public and do what we can to provide that service for the citizens. But we do respond now as ALS. There's multiple times, I don't have the numbers on me, that we do provide all the ALS treatment to the patient. The only thing we don't do is transport them. And Life Care gets that total bill. So we're already supplementing them in that case. We're still going to provide that. We want to provide that service. Our concern is that if we are throwing more now taxpayer dollars at them, that there is some kind of a checks and balance, because what we don't want them to do is, and we found out that it's over 40% of the time we have multiple calls with the fire department going on. I have to send all of my units to a structure fire, and that doesn't even meet this NFPA standard. So whenever we have multiple calls going on, whether it might be a gas call, might be an EMS call, or whatever call might come in, I don't have that available units for the rest of the city for the other emergencies. So our concern from the standpoint of the fire department is that if they're getting the subsidy and they need it, and that's great, that they are going to still provide multiple ambulances so that we know that the citizens are receiving that service. We're still going to supplement them. We have no problem doing that. We want to do that, believe me. I live here. My family lives here. My mother lives here. I want a good service, and we're here to provide that. We're not trying to take out Life Care. You've never seen me come to the podium and put a proposal to try to take over an ambulance service and kick them out. So I want to get rid of that notion that that's the case. Now, we also are very understanding that we need to provide that service, and if we have to start doing things more on our end, we're willing to do that. But that takes, obviously stuff from you guys, and we'd appreciate it. So I just want to get that notion out of there that we're somehow attacking Life Care, we're going after them. We don't want them in business. Heck, I'll tell you what, I feel sorry for the medics that run them squads, because they are overworked as much as our guys are. So I just wanted to make sure that that was the case. But we do want to have that feedback, because, you talk about the time responses. We actually can fulfill that for them. If the NFPA standard says there must be a unit on scene in 4 minutes, it doesn't have to be Life Care. It can be us. So they are making a lot of those standards based on us being there, and that's okay, right? It's about the citizens. So we're here to support them. We just want to make sure that if we're throwing out money, look, everybody's out there looking for money, right? And I'll be up here again one other time probably. So we just want to make sure that when we're using taxpayer dollars, that we are getting that return on those funds. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the committee? Mrs. Swerka?
Mr. Martinez has his hand up there.
Pardon? Any other questions from the committee first? Mrs. Swerka, I need to do that first, Mr. Martinez.
Thank you. Mr. Pileski, ballpark. How much do we get in tax revenue from the Life Care Ambulance Company? Just curious.
Withholdings, there's probably about 50,000, I believe.
Okay.
Per year.
So we're, and I'm not bashing Life Care Ambulance, I'm just want to lay out the facts here. We're getting $50,000 through you, Mr. Chairman, but we're going to...
That's withholdings from their employees. I cannot respond to net profits because that's confidential.
Okay, but we do get net profits from them.
I can't answer that.
Okay, thank you, but through you, Mr. Chairman, but the initial ask is $491,400. A couple of practical questions, whether the chief, assistant chief, Captain Bevins, they're only responding out of West Avenue, is that correct? The response is only through West Avenue?
Well, they have 3 squads, so that's the other thing when I said educate, I'll help you. Right now, Life Care runs 3 ambulances on West Avenue. They run, when we say Life Care, there isn't an Elyria Life Care and a Lorraine Life Care. It's Life Care. They run 3 ambulances on West Avenue, 4 ambulances on Reed Avenue in Lorraine, 1 ambulance in Vermillion, and 1 ambulance in Amherst. So total daily staffing is 9. So if the ambulances, they just keep a game of moving them around. What I was trying to get across was that they're so busy that I want to make sure we have enough ambulances in the city of Elyria. And right now, I would say my big thing with the RFP and the contract was, no, I want 4 ambulances in the city of Elyria. I want 4 ambulances from Life Care because of the call volume. And so, yeah, and I'm not just pulling that out of a hat. I'm basing that on like-sized cities with same population, square miles, demographics, everything.
If I could
Mrs.
continue,
Soroka,
Mr. Chairman,
please.
thank you. I, like others up here, are reticent to, write a blank check because we don't know what this number is. And I've asked a couple of times, if 3,900 is the given number of non-transports, what's that out of how many runs? Is that 50% of their runs? Is it 60% of their runs? I believe that their runs are maybe 9,000 a year, give or take. Captain Bevan, you would know that inside and out.
8,600 last.
8,600. So we are basically, they are asking us to almost pay for 50% of their total run volume. I would also state that 14 years ago, when I was chair of the safety committee, this same issue was brought forward. And I think someone alluded to the fact that we've been sort of kicking this can down the road. At that time, the administration handed off to the safety committee to do something about Life Care. It's nobody's fault. We haven't done anything. We haven't made any changes. I would just state that at this point in time, whether this goes forward or not, we need to come up with an alternative. We need to start thinking about an alternative and what that is. Neighboring communities are billing for this service. And, maybe it's hypothetical, but if 14 years ago we had started to bill for EMS through our fire department, we probably would have $800 to $1 million a year in revenue. Now, that's not enough to pay for the fire department. That's not enough to offset anything. But North Ridgeville, Avon Lake, they all bill. And we are still kicking the can down the road and not talking about that. I have made my position clear to many people. I cannot agree to a 5-year agreement. And I would encourage my colleagues to stand fast with the 3-year agreement. Again, they're coming to us with their hat in hand. We should push back a little bit and say, okay, you've been a good partner, and we're willing to do this, and we're willing to write a check to you, but there's still some give and take left here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Soroka. Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Why couldn't there be something, along the lines of a 3-year with a couple-year option as a meet you in the middle type thing?
To the law director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Bruni's coming back up. And please correct my recollection if it's less than accurate, but I believe that was pitched and it was rejected. But, Mr. Bruni?
Absolutely correct. It takes 2 to agree. That's the problem. They have said 5 years, we have said 3 years, and we're both starting to dig in here. So we're gonna have to figure out what the answer is. Somebody's gonna have to blink.
Any other questions from the committee? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who, in these preliminary discussions and all this hypothetical, who's gonna review, A, their bills and all this other that we talked about that we're following up? Fire department? The chief? The finance director? I mean, it's almost as if we need to have another person that's gonna do this. Just a question I'm throwing out there.
Mr. Stewart?
Well, I think that's, you know, something that's going to be determined here based on, the first thing is we got to get to this agreement. And that's the most critical thing. But to your point, yes, that has to be evaluated, whether that's collectively working with Life Care, the fire department, the administration, more importantly, to kind of come up with a plan. And there's a cost to that. There's no doubt about that. So I would say in the early stages here, and that's can all be factored in with the conversations with Mr. Bruning and the law director's office and the administration, trying to collectively work together to get to an understanding and what is going to be the expectation from both Life Care and through the city. So I would, yes, I understand what you're saying, but I think initially this first go around and building up to have these items in this contract are important and need to be resolved, but it's not going to happen tonight.
Yes, another piece of this, we have 21 days. We have 21 days. And should it have been, the can have been kicked for 21, or for 14 years? Absolutely not. But this has come to a head. They've given us, they drew a line in the sand with every community in the county. This is not just us. So we have to make a decision right now. So, any other questions from the committee or the administration? Then it will be, and please, I would ask for assistance in the order of this. Yes. I'm sorry, Mr. Martinez. And please, we don't have speakers during this that aren't, but I'll permit this for tonight.
I always thought, it's been a while since I've been here, I thought, that's one of the reasons why I came to committee meetings, because I thought I could speak impromptu like this.
Yes.
Is that still true?
Yes, sir.
And this is a really challenging subject, and just so you understand why I think it's challenging, because of course I was in the service and I was in the medics, and I was trained to make quick decisions, who lives and who does not die. And I thought about that question. I thought about my neighbor. Last year, she's kind of old, she fell on the driveway. I happened to hear her. So I went to pick her up. I made sure her family knew, but I didn't call 911. Now, the question is, was that a transport or was it not? That's not my call, okay? But like, could the 911 determine that on the phone possibly? Is this a pickup? And even if it's not a pickup, who would go to the house to pick her up? These are interesting questions, but the bottom line here is something needs to be done, and like it's been brought up here, it needs to be monitored very closely what's going on, because some of these might be prank calls. Some, should they have been transported? You know, it just has to be monitored, that's all. And it needs to be paid for that expense. But again, there's constant people who fall. You see that one commercial about that button, whatever it is, the woman falls, all she needs to do is be picked up, you know, but how do you really monitor something like that? But it really has to be watched and measured and followed up and studied and see what's a better way of doing this. And plus, I was in technology, so I always look at how other companies did it, and we should look at that, see how other cities are doing that, maybe work together, since this is becoming a national issue. So that's all I want to say, but I'm glad I can still talk in the committee, because that's why I quit coming to council. I'm an impromptu person.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. I enjoy being here, looking for positive changes. That's why I'm here. Thank you much.
Thank you. Please. We might have some of our answers coming up right now.
Good evening. Brett Bevan, Lieutenant, Elyria Fire Department, and the EMS coordinator, as well as the Vice President of Local 474. I just have a couple questions. My first question is how did we come to the 126 per no transport? Typically on no transports, the only thing that we bring is manpower. Occasionally we may give a breathing treatment, we may give sugar to a diabetic. That's all free from the hospital, they provide that. I'm just curious of where $126 per trip, and then for 3,900 trips, it's roughly, $400,000. How is that brought about?
When they first came to us, if I could speak to this to the law director. That's where it's, so one of the things that I wanted as finance committee chair is an accountability process. Instead of writing a check for, the first request was for $500,000, a flat fee. That didn't sit well with me. We needed some accountability behind it. So I said, let's break this down into a per unit run of a financial amount that I thought was fair annually. Then I took that even, 126 divided by 400 equates to just under 9 non-transport calls a day, every day of the year, Monday through Sunday, every day of the year. That seemed high to me, very high, 9 a day. So we're going to find that out. And again, because of the 126 per call billing that we will now get detail on, left at 10:05 p.m., arrived at 10:10 p.m. All those things that we're asking for in this contract, that's where that came from, though.
And that's only,
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, $126 represents the Medicare, Medicaid, I'm going to butcher one.
No, that's fine.
Medicaid reimbursement rate for transport. So basically, their Life Care stance is that when they're not able to transport, whether it's not appropriate or what have you, that's their wear and tear on their vehicles, that's their
insurance, labor.
Their labor costs, fuel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but you're correct. I mean, when you go out and it's sugar pill or what have you, that's not any out-of-pocket cost on your part. So, last year's numbers were just under, it was about $497,000 worth of unreimbursed costs based on all the information data that was provided to us. They gave us several years worth of back information as far as unreimbursed or non-transports.
my other question is that are they going to be held to a standard of what they provide resource-wise to the city? Right now, under the old agreements, they had to have 3 advanced life support ambulances. We know now that in the city of Lorraine, they run basic life support transports and chase it with a paramedic. They can do whatever they want elsewhere. I have to worry about our citizens. For us, what that means is if they send a basic life support and they don't have a supervisor, I have to send one of my firemen to the hospital. So in that contract.
Say that again.
So
Say it again one more time.
So like the chief was saying, basic life support and advanced life support. If we start treating them as a paramedic, if I start an IV, I have to monitor them through their transport. If I give them
all
drugs,
the way to the hospital,
a paramedic has to monitor them to the hospital. So if you send me a BLS ambulance and you don't send a supervisor chaser because you don't have it, I have to send one of my men to go with the patient to the hospital. So that puts us out of service. And us, if we catch a fire at that time, you know, that person's got to go to the hospital. They can't just say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't be with you anymore. They have to go all the way to the hospital, give a report to the doctor, and then leave. I just don't want it to see it, you know, they say we may have 3 squads, but they have to be advanced life support squads. Once we start that care, it can't be undone. So even if they were to say, well, we can take this heart attack to the hospital real quick, but if fire's already started treatment and provided ALS treatments, a paramedic has to monitor that patient the entire ride.
Okay.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, my question for my own information is, I would have to look at the particulars of the previous contract, and was that in keeping with the provisions of the previous contract, or was that somewhat of a gentleman's agreement between us and Life Care? And I'm not expecting you to be able to answer that any more than I am on the fly. So, and I'm not saying that we need to get into the weeds of all that now. So.
You have to remember when that contract previously, Mr. Fire did not run paramedic.
Bottom line is that in this contract, we were going to set the expectations that we need to set, and we're going to have measures to hold, just as we would with any other vendor. And I understand it's kind of crude to refer to Life Care as a vendor, but just like we would with any other party, that there's going to need to be measures
Contractor.
to hold them accountable. So, and yes, we will be looking for the details, obviously based on the particular expertise from your department.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
if anybody ever has questions for me about EMS in the department, please reach out. Brett Bevan, I'm available day and night.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Mrs. Sawerka.
I have an additional question that Lieutenant Bevan reminded me of. When he asked about the 126, Assistant Director Bruning, is the 126 a constant in the 5 years? Or is that a number that will change? I don't know if you said that.
I probably did not say that. 126 was a specific number that was thrown out by Life Care. That was their offer, not mine. So they came to the 126. I have yet to see the draft of the contract. Now, he did say where that number is based on, which is the Medicaid reimbursement rate. But since he called out the number of 126, I will expect to see that draft a constant 126 throughout.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, you know, to my colleague, Mr. Stewart's comment about getting in the weeds here, this is $500,000 just for this year.
Correct.
Year over year over year. I believe that we need to know as much as we can and have it clear as can be on what's expected of the vendor and what's expected from us in order to provide the service. And so I think asking all these questions is a good thing, and getting it out in the open is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the committee? Okay. The committee report. To the committee members, one of the things that we need to flush out before I read the committee report is 3, 4, or 5 year request and contract. And is that the hill that we die on? And I shouldn't, that was a terrible analogy. I apologize for that.
Terrible, but good. I mean, it's in a sense accurate, because if you don't, you're in a sense calling their bluff and hoping that they don't really intend to withdraw if we don't meet their requirement.
Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So how long have these negotiations been going on?
I've been in contact off and on with their attorney since, say, beginning of summer. I've had conversations with the previous administration about this. The fire chief's been involved. as well as a couple of members of council on various occasions.
To you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to recommend that we go with whatever Mr. Bruning brings forward. I mean, he's been in the meat of all this. He pretty much knows where it's going to go, and I don't want to sit here and pick a 3-year number or 4-year number and have this thing fall completely apart. If he thinks we can do it in a 4, I'm fine with that. If he thinks he can do it with a 3 and 2 option years, I'm fine with that. But if we have to go to 5, I don't see where we can not do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarah. Mr. Snyder?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Assistant Law Director Bruning, were we able to do a not exceed amount or no? Did we? I'm
Yes.
sorry if we're repeating. Okay.
400,000.
400. Okay, I just wanted to verify that.
We have to. That's
Okay, I just wanted to
the law.
clarify.
And again,
Thank you.
for clarification, Mr. Schneider, I apologize, Mr. Chair, through you, that not to exceed is to comply with Ohio law on municipal contracts. It is not intended to in any way limit the amount of reimbursement they will eventually get. Okay, so in other words, if we need to raise the not to exceed to pay them for services they, runs they incurred without being paid, we were going to have to do that, or we risk them terminating the contract just as we were talking about terminating for their noncompliance. Okay, thanks.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I am not on this committee, but I concur with Mr. Sarah. Mr. Brunig has been negotiating this in good faith. We trust Mr. Brunig. I think we go with what he says. At some point, we've got to say, because the bottom line is, this is about the residents. We cannot not have an ambulance service. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. We cannot not have an ambulance service.
Thank you. Mrs. Sawerka?
Sorry, one follow-up question. Since the hospital holds the pharmacy license for both Life Care Ambulance and the Elyria Fire Department, has anyone had a conversation with the hospital about any of this? I guess with the crickets, yes. Lieutenant Bevan? If the chair will entertain it.
Yes.
Thank you. They have said that if something was to happen and Life Care backed out, they would make sure that the residents of Elyria are covered. They will not let their medical direction, fail here. So they would scratch together ambulances and they'd throw Elyria firefighters on them. And we would do that for as long as we had to do. Those are the conversations I've had with our medical director, the higher ups at, the institute over there. So that's all that I've talked to them about, and they are aware of the contract and that, there's been demands throughout the service areas. But yeah, they have pledged their support to us and the city that if something was to happen and an ambulance service pulled out, we would take care of our residents.
Thank you. I think, through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that's an important point that those that aren't familiar with the hospital holding our pharmacy license and holding Life Care's pharmacy license need to know. Because in the end, they're responsible. If our fire department or Life Care employees did something wrong with a particular drug, or it gets reviewed, Lieutenant Bevan, correct? By the hospital, because they're still reviewing the calls, correct?
Dr. Singer is our medical director. He reviews almost every one of our critical calls, so.
Thank you.
And
Thank
medication
you.
usage.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Davis.
Through you, Chair, I just want to say and go on record, all these years, Life Care has been good to us. We haven't paid a dime. Am I correct?
Correct.
We never paid nothing. So now they're standing in the need, which we know everything has changed and gone up since COVID. So my question is, we don't have a contract for say, so what are we voting on tonight?
Great question. It is for the mayor to enter into an ambulance service agreement for the city. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into said agreement. It's a new contract with LifeCare. We have set that cap at $400,000, not to exceed this agreement. And we will be reimbursed $126. We reimburse them, I'm sorry. We reimburse them $126 for every call that they don't deliver a patient to because they can't bill. And should it be 1,000 calls during the year, that would be $126,000 that we would spend during calendar year. That's something we need to address too, is the dating on this. It'll be in the agreement. The start date would probably be February 1st. So it would be a 60-month agreement. Okay? Mayor Brubaker had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Lieutenant Bevan kind of touched on this, but, you know, we have 23 days before that deadline, and I have confidence in Mr. Bruning in being able to come to whatever agreement potentially this council comes up with. But I have to ask the question because as the mayor and as the safety service director to my left is going to have to answer come January 31st and there is no agreement. We can't wait until January 31st to figure out what our backup plan is if something were to go awry here. And Lieutenant Bevan actually answered that question in regards to university, but keep in mind, we are putting our guys on those squads, which is going to add personnel on shift and pulling people and overtime. There's a lot of other parameters that come into play on that. But as the mayor and the safety service director, we got to understand what our role is going to be, provided this does go awry, whether it's a 3, 4, or 5 year contract. That's up to this body here, but just keep that in mind that we're talking 23 days.
Thank you. And the ordinance itself that I'm going to read does not have committee report, does not have a length. So I will leave that to Mr. Brunig's discretion. Excuse me.
I think we should say a 5-year contract, if that's what we're looking at. I mean, I want the essential terms set by the committee here. I appreciate your confidence in me to negotiate this. I do, but I take my direction from council, not the other way around. I advise you. I've given you my opinion based on the facts so far. I've given you my opinion that LifeCare is only going to accept a 5-year deal. But I would like that in the committee report, you know, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 years. I would like that, you know, that set forth along with the $126 per run. Those essential terms are the ones that I am basing my authority on when I go to the to LifeCare's attorney and actually finalize the nuts and bolts of the contract. I still want, I'm okay negotiating things like, you know, what records we want to, you know, require from them, et cetera. $126 per run, 5-year contract, not to exceed $400,000. Those are things I think I want to see in the committee report.
Thank you. Ms. Swerka.
So the committee report, the ask of the committee is to support the law director, assistant law director negotiating this contract, but it's not going to come back to council.
It has to come back to council.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I will be voting no if it's for 5 years. I would strongly encourage a 3-year with a 1 or 2 year option when we don't even know what the reimbursement's going to be going forward. But I think that I agree, as I am very reticent in my agreement, that we need to do something right now. And our backs are to the corner, and it's 14 years of kicking the can down the road. But 5 years is way too long with all the unknowns of how much money what Medicare reimbursement is going to be in 24, 25, 26. So when this comes up, if it comes up as just the plain committee report, I will be voting no. For 5 years, I can't see it. It's not workable. Again, they've come to us with their hat in hand. And to Mrs. Davis's point, that it hasn't cost us anything, it has cost us millions of dollars in wear and tear on the fire department equipment because we're responding. But that's out of the equation. I'm not going to go down that road.
Mr. Sarah.
I'm just going to throw out a question to Ms. Swerka. So if we stand by the 3-year, for example, and not go with the 5-year that's locked in at 126, do you really think that those fees would come downward going forward and that gives us that extra time to come up with some kind of backup plan, and we are locked in at a steady figure? Thank you.
Question was to you.
I didn't hear his question. I just heard his statement. What was the question, Mr. Sarah?
I asked if he thought that the 126 number would potentially drop after 3 years instead of go up. And, I mean, that would give us, if we did the 5-year at the 126, that gives us an extra 2 years to come up with some kind of plan and figure out how we're going to pay for it.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, so is your question, do I think the 126 is going to stay in place?
No, what he's getting at, so if we do a 3-year contract and we don't have a completed plan in place, Life Care comes back to us and says, all right, we're ready to do another 3-year. It is now $297. Now we're in a real bind. That's what he's asking.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
That's why we need, through you, Mr. Chairman, that's why if we're going to do this agreement and we do it for 3 years, then we start immediately figuring out what the next steps are to provide services.
Mitchell.
Mrs. Mitchell. No, I was thinking. I'm sorry. I wasn't lost in space, I promise.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bruning. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you say Life Care would not do a 3-year contract? Now, you can go back and ask them, of course, but did they not say they would not?
You got to understand, through you, Mr. Chair, you got to understand, Mrs. Mitchell, that when I'm having these discussions, I'm talking from one attorney to the other. And both of us have general parameters around which we're making these discussions, but for the most part, both of us have to say at the end of the conversation, let me take that back to my client. Now, he's gotten a strong impression from his client, like I'm getting the impression from you guys pretty strongly, that you would prefer a 3-year deal, and he's getting the strong impression that they would only agree to a 5-year deal. Of course, anything can happen. This is one of those things. We have 23 days, as the mayor pointed out, and yes, maybe we do have some kind of backup option. I don't know how viable it is for more than a couple of weeks or maybe longer, but the question I have for you is, are you prepared to let them call our bluff on this, I guess?
And I am not.
So I don't know what they're going to do. I'm only guessing.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Through you, Mr. Chair, through you. Never mind. Thank you. Never mind.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do have concerns if we do a 3-year that, like we had just addressed, that the rate be substantially higher for the following 3 or 2 years that we would have been locked in at for 5. So that is, a concern that I do have.
Thank you. Sorry. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and read the committee report. We have considered the matter of entering into an ambulance service agreement for the city with Life Care, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into said agreement not to exceed $400,000 per year, reimbursed at a rate of $126 per non-run, not to exceed a 5-year contract. I would ask that this be done as an emergency. Can I get an approval of the motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded.
Under discussion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Do we have to, where's the money going to come out of? Is that in the committee report? Do you still put that in there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, excuse me, that would have to be a general fund expenditure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, for the question.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded. I've got a call for the question. All in favor of the motion, use a voting sign aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. 1 nay. Motion carries. Item number 9, the matter of creating a new capital project fund. Finance Director Pileski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's one Ohio Public Works Commission project that's just about done. I think it's the Abbey Road from Chestnut Ridge to University. So this fund would account for the amount paid directly to the vendors by the Ohio Public Works Commission. Even though they pay it, we have to still flow it through our books as a revenue and expense. So this fund will account for those transactions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee on this? Let me read the committee report then. We have considered the matter of creating a new capital project fund, an ordinance authorizing a new capital project fund titled Abbey Road, Chestnut Ridge to University Avenue, Repair and Resurfacing Project. Excuse me, is this an emergency?
Yes, thank you.
Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded. Question's been called. All in favor of the motion, use the voting sign aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next item, final item on the agenda, number 10, the matter of amendments to the 2024 temporary appropriations. Mr.
Thank you, Mr.
Pileski.
Chair. We don't have any amendments tonight.
Amazing.
Wonderful. Mrs. Sawerka?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, miscellaneous business. I have 2 questions. Are we going to at some point clean up these old pending items that are still in finance that we?
Mr. Brubaker, Mayor Brubaker.
Thank you, Councilman. Through you to Councilwoman Sawerka, I was just talking to Director Panowski about going through those items from our end to see what needs to stay on there or bring it forward or remove what we need to remove, and I'll make that recommendation at the next finance meeting.
Thank you, because some of them are pretty old. And then I have one additional question that's really, we got a copy of the water notice, the increase of the water and sewer rates that was referred. This is not this doesn't need to go to committee, I believe, right? It just is an automatic.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I believe Ms.
Yeah, Debbie's gone.
Left. Those were passed. I would have to look at the actual ordinance, but I think that's just a reminder for all of you. Those rates were passed in 2020. Oh, I'm looking at Mr. Schneider.
So this was.
I'm sorry? Yes, we've
Yes,
had
it was a
several
scale.
years worth in, I want to,
21?
I believe right after the last council term began. But I might be remiss. I can get the exact date.
No, I was
Yeah.
just curious as to the implementation, and I have another specific question that I will ask Mrs. Connor, which is, and maybe the finance director knows the answer to this, are we still assuming the service fees on credit cards when people pay for their water bill? Are we still eating that?
You know, that is all handled downstairs in utilities, so I don't know if we're assuming that or not. to be honest with
Okay,
you.
so I don't want to take up time, but I'd like that question answered
Okay.
at some point. I'll talk to Mrs. Connor.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. If there's no forward business, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Stewart, for all your help.